First off, I want to say welcome to Jackass with a Welder. Jackass with a Welder is a nickname that someone gave me recently. A professional BMW mechanic, because he basically said that I don't have the skills to give people advice about working on BMWs. And the truth is, this is my disclaimer, but I really do not have the skills to, I didn't go to BMW school or anything like that. So, as my disclaimer, I'm just a guy who likes to fix things. And I never went to BMW school, and I'm not going to claim to be the best BMW mechanic in the whole world. However, I really like to fix things, and I'm pretty good at it. And in this case, I'm fixing something on my BMW, so I thought I'd share it for other people. This is the output flange to the transmission. And the bolts that go into that output flange are the bolts that connect it to the drive shaft. And due to a comedy of errors that started with the owner before me and now ended up me not catching it, there is now a problem. The drive shaft worked loose recently, and when it worked loose, the bolt ended up damaging the threads. So if I take this really good bolt here and I start it, it goes in. Okay, that's half, one and a half. It goes in about 1.5 turns and then it catches. And that's because the threads are damaged inside the output flange. Now if I go to one of the other bolt holes, it just goes right in. If they don't go right in, they're screwed up. I mean, that's kind of obvious. So now I suppose I could pull the transmission and pull that output flange, and I could do all kinds of crazy things to try and spend a ton of money or buy a new transmission. But what I've done is I've taken another bolt, and this is actually an old lock washer bolt, but it had pretty good threads, and I've reduced the size of the thread slightly, and I put a cut in it right there, a piece of debris in it, and that cut is made with a Dremel tool, and this will act as a thread chaser to chase those threads. Because the deal is if I try to put that new bolt in there with the drive shaft in place, it could go in well, it could make it in, but there's equal chance or more chance that it'll cross thread and damage the threads permanently, and then I'm going to end up having to replace the output flange, which I don't want to do. So you can see I have a little cut in this one. I'm starting it in, and it goes in the same 1.5 turns, and it meets with the resistance. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a 12 point 10 millimeter socket that I'm sitting around here somewhere. This may take a second for me to find. Oh, here it is. And I'm going to take my trusty Mac wrench. Alright, now I'm going to start messing with it like I'm working a tap, and it's sticking. It's sticking a little less. There it's sticking again. Okay, you can see where it's sticking, because see how it keeps moving the output flange? And eventually it's really going to stick. Maybe not. There it's stuck. Maybe a little more. Okay, now I'm going to switch off the handheld, and I'm going to use a socket wrench with an extension. The same socket. Now, it's in there far enough that it's already aligned itself with the threads. so I can put more force in it. Turn that back out. Turn it in. Oh, now it's going great. Okay, now the big thing is this is a lock washer bolt, so it has a shoulder here, and then the threads stop. So I don't want to go past the shoulder, so I just need to go in as far as the shoulder. There's also a seal in here. If you're using like a lock washer bolt, you have to watch out about hitting the seal. But I've got enough clearance, so I'm not going to catch it. Okay, it's locking up about that deep, but that is more than deep enough. Yeah, that's kind of the bottom of it anyway. Let's turn it in and out a few times. That's cool. It locks up before it gets so far that it actually contacts the seal. You know, I bet the reason it's locking up is because, like I said, that little change in the thread, because it's a lock washer bolt. Doesn't really matter. Now, this whole problem was caused because some previous owner idiot, initially when I bought the bike, this is so crazy, I got the bike and I was riding it one day and I heard this kind of slap, squishing sound, and I knew right away it was the bolts had come loose on the drive shaft. I swear to God, I have this instinctive feeling about such things, and I just knew right away. So I actually took it, rolled it home because I was close to home, and found that the drive shaft was really only put on with a couple lock washer bolts. But it didn't even occur to me that they were lock washer bolts at the time. And I put the shaft back in, and both bolts were good. So I put those two bolts back in, even though they were lock washer bolts and they didn't have their lock washers. And then I put in two of the right bolts, which are non-lock washer bolts, which are shorter, which is what I'm going to put in now. So I'm riding it recently, and the drive shaft worked loose again, and it started because those stupid lock washer bolts don't take the same torque when they're missing their lock washers. And you're not supposed to use them anyway, because if you do, they can possibly catch the seal behind it. But I think, just like this one keeps stopping right about here, that the torque setting is off when you use them, and they don't work correctly. But anyway, this was one of the holes where a bolt had worked partially out, and that bolt being partially out and loose bunged up the threads enough that it wasn't taking a new bolt. But after all this reaming action I'm giving it, I bet I can do it by hand now. Yeah, now I can just turn it in and out by hand. Yeah, that's all going in my hand now. This is great. So it should offer no resistance to the new bolt. The shaft, the extension I'm using is, I just got it all oily, so that's hard for me to turn, but it actually is coming out by hand. So isn't that beautiful? So let's find out the bolt that I was just going to use, which is, this is a non-lock washer bolt. It's actually a really good bolt. Let's see how far it goes in. Okay, it's still getting a little resistance, but I bet you it's just going to go in fine with the wrench. And the problem was before is it wasn't going in well with the wrench. It was really locking up completely where I couldn't turn it at all. Yeah, it's feeling a little snug, but it is going in fine. It's not binding up. Okay, that's more than enough that it needs to go. So put it in, take it out. So problem solved. Yeah, when the first time I tried to use this bolt in that hole, it literally only turned in an inch, a turn and a half, and then it completely locked up. And if I tried to go any further, I probably lost it. That's interesting. There's a little metal on that bolt. Now, I don't know if you can see that. Not much. I'm going to take it in and out again. Oh, no, it's not metal, it's just grease. Good. It's like a little light colored. If you can see that. See that little light colored stuff? I thought that was metal that was coming off, but it's not. It's good. I'm going to run it back in and out again. Oh, cool. Now it's going right in. So, problem solved. Now, you might think it's really stupid to make a video of this, you know, because it's all I essentially did is take a bolt and cut a groove in it, and, you know, but someone who really, you know, has a BMW where their bolts aren't going in correctly into the output flange, you know, I mean, if you take it to a BMW dealer, they could say, oh, well, we're going to have to, like, pull the whole transmission out and replace the flange, which is, you could do that, but that would cost thousands of dollars. Or they could just say, well, we have to, like, you know, pull the flange and chase it out with a tap chaser. But once again, you're talking about a lot of money. As you can see, at home, in my shop, just using an old bolt that happened to have good threads that I put a cut into it, I was able to get that thing to thread back in correctly. And in the process, there's no way that cut new threads, so it didn't damage anything like that. And I suppose I could have ordered even a thread chaser online, and I could have used that. But using the actual bolt, you know, it's like a full-length thread chaser might have gone in too deep and damaged the seal or something. It's interesting. I've always heard these bolts used without the lock washer will damage the seal behind them, but there's enough clearance there that you can actually almost tighten it all the way in. Certainly with the driveshaft flange in place, it would not be an issue. But I think what is the bigger issue is the shoulder on these lock washer bolts inhibits them going all the way in. And I mean, you can see that, like, I can turn this bolt almost all the way in, but then when it gets to the shoulder, and it's not even all the way, the threads are not all the way in, but when it gets to here, it bounds up. So don't use lock washer bolts without the lock washers, or lock washer bolts at all. And if you ever have a hole that's not threading correctly for your drive shaft, when you're using a new bolt, you can use an old bolt with a cut in it as a thread chaser and fix it. So this is Jim Day, jackass with a welder, according to BMW authorities. And here's the video to, like, fix your bunged up threads in your output shaft. Now I'm just going to put the swing arm back in, bolt it right up, and it's all going to work fine.